It feels like the longer video games are made, the more ethically challenging it is to consume the products of the medium. Recently, I was scrolling through my timeline and I saw an article titled, "We Harvest Shadows is the perfect antithesis to Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley." I clicked, read it, and decided to try the game. For those around me, most know that I like to try games. I even like to try to get the word out about projects that are small or underappreciated, because God knows I would rather indie succeed than whatever passes for games worth your time by larger companies. Which has culminated in the creation of this video. A video I really didn't want to make, and the more I played the demo, the more I felt it was something I needed to say. First impressions are everything, and We Harvest Shadows really doesn't come off on the right foot. Perhaps this is partially Game Rant's fault for tying this game to Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley, but I also think most of the blame comes down to the fact the game looks like many others. It really doesn't have any style to speak of, which immediately rang alarm bells in my head because as I gaze at the assets present throughout the game's opening cinematic, my mind isn't fixated on Garrett, the main character's conflict, and past being unveiled, but rather I'm wondering how many of these assets are purchased off of the Unity store. I promise, I don't want to immediately tear down another's work, so I kept playing, and playing, and playing. In total, it's taken me about 2 playthroughs of this demo, totaling 7.5 hours. Although off the bat, I think we have a bit of a spiritual crisis going on. It's clear the game wants me to have emotions about this character, and if you play the game's rules, I'm sure your 2-hour experience would result in something that appreciates that far more. But I've gotta say, I'm just not invested at all. The voice acting is serviceable, if a little overcooked, but then there's dialogue as I explore that just feels totally ham.
Whew. Come on, fat ass, you can do this.
All of this story is surrounding a Harvest Moon-like experience that is entirely underwhelming. I understand that this is a demo, but most of the mechanics here feel like ideas of games that weren't played. Finicky default controls make harvesting tomatoes and eggs difficult. Watering is a breeze, planting isn't aligned to a grid, so you always have these cockeyed rows of crops. It's easy to chop down trees, causing the logs to get stuck over the fence, long before the demo allows you over. You can't move buildings purchased, not to mention placing chicken coops suffer from that same safe grid issue. In Harvest Moon 64 and Story of Seasons, your character splashes water in essentially a predictable, repeatable pattern. This waters all the plants that surround you. It leaves watered plants with a vibrant, dripping sprite, conveying to the player what is and is not watered. This means that you have to think about where your crops are, but it makes watering more engaging. It communicates the act effectively to the player as well. In We Harvest Shadows, there's some dripping and a light sheen, but it certainly is hard to see at the start and end of the game's days. And the default flashlight every indie Unity game uses doesn't help things either. Some of these things are bugs, but I've got to be honest, if I, someone who's played the newest Animal Crossing, a few Harvest Moons, and Story of Seasons titles, notice all of this immediately, well, it seems we have an issue. Perfectionism is the death of a lot of creative ventures, but sometimes when you're putting out something, you have to do so with your best foot forward. Maybe some will say, this game isn't trying to be those games. It wants to focus on its narrative. If so, then it's even more important that the system is gutted and replaced with something cleaner and even more hands-off. Nothing kills my emotional investment in a hallucinated severed head in my chimney quite as quick as not being able to tell which plot of dirt has a plant or is bare because the developer didn't make the dirt a darker color to better allow the new seed to contrast with the grass around it, or fiddling around for 5 seconds to hit the magic pixel that allows me to harvest the last tomato on vine 25 of 35. These are problems of someone who has said good enough for their demo. So naturally now I had to do the grunt work of seeing just how much of this game was made and how much of it was bought, and it's a lot. Like, a concerning amount. The axe cutting mechanic, the carrying log mechanic, even the scrap metal you can carry and sell, the buildable script system, all of it is one package, dragged and dropped into the game. Suddenly it starts to make sense why these mechanics don't work like other games. They're not made, just purchased. And it's not just the survival system, the cinematic script system, the ATV that's foreshadowed as usable, the giant silo. I've sourced quite a few of these and eventually come to the conclusion this demo is more assets bought than it is assets made. When we talk about single dev ventures, it's easy to overlook how hard each and every aspect of making the game is, but if everything isn't made by the dev, well, I suppose we have at best a real Ship of Theseus game dev question on our hands. Have I sourced or hunted down every single asset in the game? No. And I personally don't think I need more than what I have to make the core point that in terms of game design, there's a reason everything feels stapled together.
Wow, I can't get over this view.
The story unfortunately isn't as simple as me not liking a game or even the game being an asset flip because, like all interesting stories, this game has some shaky footings after its demo release. Just this month, the gaming outlet TechRaptor put out an article titled, "We Harvest Shadows dev admits he's quote-unquote out of money, asks for advice." Seems not all is well in the castle of hyped-up indie projects. I won't regurgitate the article word for word, or even showcase the posts on the Steam forums that back up the core situation, but basically as it stands, the dev says the game needs a year or more, and is asking his players if he should, get this, use his retirement fund to fund the game's completion, or find a publisher, and also says he isn't sure if he wants this to be a, quote, $15 venture or $20 game it deserves to be. To the dev, if you are watching this, I cannot stress enough how inappropriate this feels, and how invasive and vulnerable it is. Indies struggle a lot, this I know, and indies also are naturally going to run into trouble. But by exposing that you don't have the footing to make this game that, in my opinion, feels like a collection of assets rather than a real labor of love come to fruition, it to me can only come off as predatory. If you are asking fundamental questions about what you're making and splitting hairs over a $5 price difference, then to me it sounds like you lack serious vision. And this kind of aligns with my overall feelings and concerns. The game is named We Harvest Shadows, which kinda just evokes Harvest Moon via its namesake, yet its survival and farming mechanics are basically just drag and dropped into the game. Much of the mechanics and their bugs I've had issues with are part of this package, which means you don't know how to make them, much less fix any of these in ways that are going to benefit what you're going for, and you don't even know what you're going for. I started off this video by saying that I felt I didn't want to make this video. Just a few days ago, I wanted to basically sound the alarm on what to me felt like a slow games journalism day with a generic Unity asset flip. But now I have to admit I feel emotionally conflicted. Having played it more than anyone at this point, I cannot say We Harvest Shadows is a gaming experience unlike anything else. Relaxing yet terrifying, beautiful yet ugly, the type of experience which sits with you for years after the closing credits. Well, maybe that last part. It certainly lingered with me for longer than I'd like. As always, my name is Buns. If you like this kind of content, stick around. Otherwise, I hope next time I can make a video that doesn't confuse me as much as this game's dev is. See ya. Also, yes, the game's sun does rise in the west.